the blue-green ones come in for a blue, like the 1-cost ones come in for a blue, the yellow-green ones come in for a green, the green-red ones come in for a red, the red-blue ones come in for a blue, and then the blue-green ones come in for a blue, right? So what? No.
Wait, what?
There is something there.
I got lost in the middle of the colors.
But anyway, yeah.
Hello and welcome to Super ComBros, the Dragon Ball Super card game podcast, where we stop in the middle of it and the power levels don't matter. Right, this is part 2 of our discussion on keywords. Don't go and check out part 1. I'm Barry, and joining me again are Vince. Say hi, Vince.
Hey everyone, nice to see you again.
And Matt.
Hello, everybody.
Good day. I said good day.
Well, good night is like an end, right? Even though last time I said good evening, and now it's well and truly into the night time.
Yeah, so back-to-back episodes. This is the kind of dedication you'll get from us Super ComBros, putting into letting you know what we think, even though nobody asked for it. But that's okay. So we're talking about the keywords. We're particularly focused on things that were a little undercooked. But obviously, there's so many keywords that we're kind of talking about everything. So a little bit scope creep from where we started off.
You've got to establish some boundaries of what the keywords are and what they mean to say if it's good, undeveloped or not, don't you? So
very true. I mean, we could just gloss over things that are fine, but never mind. Let's keep going. So picking up again with another sort of relatively new keyword. Don't know if it's still relatively new, but arrival. So for anybody who doesn't know what arrival does, you combo in certain colours of cards during the combo step, and then you can pay energy to play a card for that cost. And it will come into play. There's no arrival extras, is there?
No.
There you go. There's some design space for you, Bandai. Don't say I don't give you nothing.
That'd be pretty cool, actually, wouldn't it? During the combo.
The activate battle.
Yeah, if you've comboed. I guess you just put arrival in it, right? But they come into play. I don't know. The wording will be nonsense anyway because it's Bandai, so you can play any old shit and they'll tell you something else.
We could do an episode about the wording, yeah, and how the rulebook is. But yeah, I guess we're kind of skipping ahead already a bit, but an extra card with arrival would probably have to be arrival 0, because otherwise you would just make it activate battle, I guess, although you could make it activate battle with both, 0 cost.
You could just give it 6 cost, right? And then no one would ever play it for its
actual cost. As long as it's not red-blue.
Yeah, as long as it's not red-blue.
So for more on red-blue, listen to our previous episode.
But the thing is, if you give it arrival 0, you might as well just cost it 0 to start with. What's the point of make it 6 cost?
Because then you have to combo something in, like you can't just have it.
Yeah, it's an extra cost. That's not energy, right?
Yeah, fair play.
That's the point of arrival, is that you can play these more powerful cards in for cheaper because you're spending card advantage for tempo advantage.
Yeah, certainly. So Bandai.
But anyway, that is not what arrival does. So let's talk about what it does do.
Well, I just said what it does. You're trading card advantage for tempo advantage.
Yeah, true enough. I mean, in terms of how developed it is, it's only came out, set 7?
Yeah.
I don't think it's too underdeveloped. I mean, there was enough in there and enough impactful cards that you might want to consider using arrival in a relatively decent selection of decks. And even in the first Unison Warrior set there was still sort of 4 multicolor arrival cards. It's still getting support. I can't remember what particularly was arrival in sets 8 and 9, but they could easily drop in 2-4 cards a set and keep this keyword alive and make them useful cards or meaningful cards. I mean, does the new Jiren, does that support any successor? Or
yeah, it means it's a 6 cost card that comes in for 2. So
boom goes the dynamite. So yeah, I mean, to my mind, Arrival's fine. It's not something they've forgotten or doesn't totally dominate the meta, but it's powerful and impactful. So it's kind of.
And it's the thing with Arrival is it changes the cost of the card. The nature of the cost, of course, as Matt said, but basically just changes the cost of the card. So you need to make sure that the card you print in power level is matching its cost. The card that comes to my mind when I think strong Arrival cards is always the cooler one, the red-blue cooler one that gives minus 20 to 2 cards? Your choice for 1 energy when you've played of course, when you can Arrival red-blue. And I'm like, whoa, this is every time I see it coming down for 1 energy, I'm like, wow, that's massively impactful. And I guess that's just making sure that you can thread that line correctly.
Yeah, I mean, you've comboed in red-blue, which is probably just 1 card. What are the red-blue super combos?
It's the Beerus that sends a...
Stands energy. So you're very likely to play that. The 20k double striker, mill cards, opponents' cards get negged. Yeah, I mean it's super strong for effectively 1 energy, right?
Yeah, that's my point. Basically, it's super strong for 1 energy. I know it costs you cards before, like you've dropped a blue-red card, whether it's the super combo or any of the others, like the new 3-cost Goku that goes into Invoker and that costs 0 to combo. Basically, is another one of them. But yeah, like even when you put that in perspective, it's just so strong. So strong. And when you see that, I know it's not the same deck, but when you think about even just playing a super combo and another card next to it, even a red super combo and a blue card next to it, like you don't lose too much in card advantage. You probably gain the battle in defense. You get the Arrival out of it. If the body is strong, then the impact is big. Sorry, and I realize I'm going on a tangent here, but ultimately, I believe the keyword in itself is fairly underwhelming. It's exciting for the fact that it brings characters into play at a time that's not the one they should come into play normally on. But yeah, that's just
well, yeah. I mean, it allows you to come in on defense as well, right? So that's quite interesting, and it can also set up a better defensive turn. It's not just an offensive ability.
That's what I mean. Like to me, Arrival is better played in defense, and yeah, I mean that's just a different type of cost. Be mindful of the power you print with the cost you have. Like, and that's a very thin line to thread. It's not easy. I mean, I'm not exactly excited about. It's a bit like it's comparable to all the Vex Evolve Union swap that we discussed in the previous episode, and at the same time, it feels like it's more powerful because it's just 1 card. You don't need the exact other cards of the chain to play it. You just need to have other cards in hand, basically. So
yeah. I think back up sort of more on topic with the Arrival, and like it's good and they're kind of supporting it. It's nice, but I think one of the interesting things about it is so far pretty much all of the Arrival cards, bar the secret rare, are all either 2 NG to arrive or 1 NG. So it'd be kind of nice if they sort of expand on it a little bit more, maybe get some 3 or 4 NG ones to come in.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be kind of a bit of room they can go into. I think it's quite nice that red-green, because when I sort of first started the game, the red-green kind of like identity, their Arrival stuff was a little bit stronger, but that might only because later on the other sets then got theirs. So it's kind of nice that red-green has this little bit of identity, like it has this big Arrival secret rare we have to pay 5 NG for. But yeah, maybe some other cards that have like 3 or 4 Arrival costs would be nice. There are also, if you look at the colour pairs, they're all shifted, right? So the blue-green ones come in for a blue, like the 1-cost ones come in for a blue, the yellow-green ones come in for a green, the green-red ones come in for a red, the red-blue ones come in for a blue, and then the blue-green ones come in for a blue, right? So what? No.
Wait, what?
There is something there.
I got lost in the middle of the colours.
But anyway, yeah.
Like
anyway, I can't remember.
A rainbow.
Yeah, I'll have to write it down, but there are like...
consistency there. I think what you're saying...
It'd be kind of nice to have maybe another mechanic that works the other way, for the colours. So instead of arrival for a green yellow one, the arrival is just a green cost. I think that's looking at them. That is the cost if it's just 1 NG. It'd be kind of nice to have another mechanic, sort of maybe similar but different, where it'd be a yellow that you pay.
Yeah.
And it does, it's sort of
So
like a
they
quest.
could do something different with the opposite colour.
Yeah.
What that is, debatable.
Well, I guess
mhm.
I guess Bandai already heard you on this, as here I'm looking at the Arrival blue-yellow cards that exists, and we have actually 2 of them that cost 4, for example, because I just went this way. There's the new Sangoku and Hits.
That costs
the
1.
that costs 1 blue to bring in play, and there's the Blue Jack one from expansion set 5, Unity of Destruction, which costs 1 to bring in as well, but 1 yellow instead of 1
Oh,
blue.
right. I thought they were shifted in a specific way, but obviously not.
But maybe they are. Or I guess not really, in earnest, because Sangoku and Hit, you play a blue, and you switch that card to active mode. And for Bojack, you play a yellow, and you switch a card to rest mode.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just the red-green ones, because that's I mainly play green, but obviously when I'm trying to play green, I'm trying to do these arrival cards. I'm looking at the red ones, and you have to pay red NG to bring them in. Whereas if you're playing red, then you can play the red-green arrival cards by just playing the Nappa super combo.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean,
sorry, I was going to say red-green in terms of where you're saying felt slightly stronger for arrival was perhaps enabled by the Raditz.
Yeah.
So then you had both your super combos and your Raditz cards that enabled arrival. So you could actually pick and choose a bit better rather than having to use a super combo or 2 cards or pay an energy. You had this second layer to enable.
But, as an example, in a way, of how I think Arrival can be tricky to balance, like the Sangoku and Hit that we just mentioned, that we mentioned as well in the previous episode. This card, Rivals for 1 blue. And today, the blue decks play the blue-yellow Zamasu super combo and just 4 of the apes, and with that, are able to play that Sangoku and Hit and basically just play these yellow cards to play it, and that's enough. And it really shows that that's a card that costs 1, that's technically so powerful that you are okay to swap a bit your deck to play just a few yellow cards to play it in.
But I think that's also a result of the Zamasu super combo being really strong, and also the yellow apes just being really strong as well, right? They're generically really strong. They go in any deck. That's a discussion for another time, but just the fact that those happen to be in those color pairs result in that card being strong, rather than, I think if it was in another color pair, then it'd be less good. And you're right, they've got to balance it against the sort of enablers as much as.
I would disagree with that, because I do think with any color pairs, you'll find the right super combo today to play it. Maybe yellow-green is the one that's a bit lacking, but all the rest of the pairs have super combos that are strong enough. Okay, and now I think about the red-blue Beerus. Anyway, and you can always find another zero combo cost for 5k, decent card of 1 color, even decent, just good card of 1 color that can go in your deck. The apes are, of course, the ultimate card that does that.
But the apes are colorless, right? They're colorless apart from when they're in the combo.
Yeah, absolutely. And my point is, you can find apes are not equivalent to the apes, but of course they will never be perfectly in that level. But you can find cards equivalent to the apes in all colors.
I disagree with that for sure.
All right, well, let's.
I'll be the deck, and we'll see how that goes.
Find me a card. Find me a green card that's equivalent to an ape. That'll basically go in any off-color deck.
And I am now on the hunt.
Right, but not during the podcast. Right, moving on. Anyway, Arrival, decent. there's a lot going on there. Not underdeveloped. Let's hope they get some new cards. But what we're saying there, Arrival's a way of cheating in cards, right? Paying less to get them. So let's look, probably in conjunction here, Overrealm and Dark Overrealm. So, I mean, Overrealm's ubiquitous, no? Vince, have you ever built a deck that doesn't have an Overrealm card in it?
I have done that actually quite often, but it's always like start by building your deck, and when you get to the point where it becomes competitive, provided you can play without your drop, you're looking to put in like even just a couple of impactful Varialm cards, just because like it's free bonkers. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say it's interesting to use that area, and I think Bandai have made some strides towards making your drop more important in a couple of ways. But Overrealm's been in, gets support every set, and I think it's pretty good for that. And there's a wide variety of things that you can do with it, either for free Overrealms or for X amount of cards and energy. Matt, what's your thoughts on Overrealm?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's quite nice, right? In some ways, like it gives you a little bit of resource that's using the discard pile. And a lot of card games really fuck up when you start using your discard pile as a resource. And I think Overrealm has been around long enough that they've kind of worked out a way to make it kind of balanced by being like once a turn, it uses your entire drop area, so it's not as easy to do the next turn unless you're like running a black dedicated Overrealm leader. But you still get these like free, reasonably powerful cards. They keep bringing out new ones. So there's a bit of variety. Unfortunately, I think the default position of this game is that you probably run maybe 2 or 3 just Overrealm cards, because why wouldn't you? And there's very little cost to putting them in your deck. So from a deck building perspective, it's a bit boring. And I think a lot of decks now are running the Bardock, where you draw 2 cards and drop 1. And then there's a bit of homogenization. Not just now, but there's a lot of homogenization of decks in some way because of that.
Sorry, my not just now came across as should be not just now, but also previously.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's one of the best Overrealm cards.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I like it as a mechanic. It doesn't feel broken. It feels like just a good bit. And I think there's definitely a bit of pleasure in a game where you spend a load of resources attacking your opponent and attacking them, and they think they've kind of survived everything, and then you Overrealm a big card and win from there. And
yeah, you can be tapped out and bring out something big.
Which is quite nice, that little bit of surprise, I think, always makes the games a bit more exciting, especially like casually.
Yeah. And there's a lot, we discussed before, but there's a lot of surprises in this game. You're never sure that you're going to get the win if your opponent has to negate, if your opponent has whatever. And Overrealm's another bluffing mechanism. It's another potential, way of getting there. I definitely want to talk about Dark Overrealm. Right, so there's 6 cards with Dark Overrealm. I mean, I would argue that it should never really have been a thing. Right?
I think it's a really good way for them to make black cards kind of have a specified cost when they don't have specified costs in the game, right? They make Darker Overrealm, you can only remove black cards from your walk to pay for it, and that makes it sort of specify costs. Now, obviously, recently they've been going on for this, like cards with, if all your energy is black and all your cards are black in it, and your leader is black, and it's a bit like that's too many words on a card in some ways to make it like a specified cost. Whereas Darker Overrealm is quite nice and tight, and it just goes, and then it also gives black a bit more identity, and that's kind of what black I think originally was about. It's about the Overrealm stuff, using the warp, using that kind of like weird universe side, and I think it does create a bit of theme. So I think maybe they should develop it more, but
I'm not convinced. Like, obviously, it only supports black, right? So that's the first thing. And certainly when it came out in set 4 Overrealm, black cards in general, there wasn't any black cards before then. I gave it a small power bump at the time when it was pretty far behind the other colours in terms of development. It was only ever a side colour, like your second colour, and when it first came out. And then if you went mono black, then this was something that you could get access to. Or if you went heavy on black, something you could get access to. But they've never touched it since, as far as I'm aware. In fact, let me have a look. Dark Overrealm. I'm probably not going to come up with it, but Dark Overrealm. So, I mean, if they weren't going to use it again, then...
Yeah, and I think, this is the point of this, kind of like looking through the keywords and looking at it in development a bit. And this is definitely an area of design where they could keep pushing and getting more Dark Overrealm cards.
Well, I think they kind of saw... I don't think they're going to revisit Dark Overrealm, really. The only reason to do it is if black as a monocolor deck becomes too underpowered. You could throw in a strong Dark Overrealm card to support it. But as a core part of black's identity, I don't really see it.
Maybe not, but I think I just prefer it to the wording then, if all your energy is black and your leader is black.
Yeah, but that restricts things in a different way, right? I mean, you could run a heavy black deck and get Dark Overrealm. So they also have to be wary of black as a splash, right? Or black as a second colour in other decks if they were to make Dark Overrealm cards powerful enough. But yeah. Vince, you got anything else on Dark Overrealm?
Really, honest.
It's not that interesting.
I like the keyword because it makes you play with the wolf. To me, that's one of the keywords that made the game a bit like Evolve and the rest, that made the game really interesting to me, because you explore an area that doesn't really exist in other games, like the battle area, the energy area, discard, the deck, the hand. Like, these are pretty staples. Combo area doesn't really mean much, to be fully honest. At least it doesn't really today. This area is very new. The warp area is the one that for me that really became something, and seeing all these cards going from your discard there and then having a number of interactions with what happens in the warp, coming back into play, coming back to your deck, your hand. I do like Overrealm for how it is the core of what the warp area brings to the game. Now, Dark Overrealm in itself, mostly that's different type of cost. To me, it's fairly similar to Rival. Okay, most of the time, to me, it's basically a Rival for black.
Okay. And I think, something else that suffers from a similar problem to Dark Overrealm, Wormhole. Right, so I mean, the chances of you having seen that is pretty slim. It's only on 2 cards.
Leader, isn't it?
Well, it's on Demigra, leader, and it's on a Demigra card as well, an EX card. And it's not really something you can expand. You can't give a lot of things Wormhole to be able to play 2 cards for free, almost, right?
Well, you have to play it for free. You have to play the first one, replenish your discard enough, your drop area enough, and then the second one to really make use of Wormhole, which is very strong when you get there, because you get a massive advantage. And I'm very fine with it being only on 2 cards and just sporadically seeing another print every 2 or 3 sets, whatever.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but I think in the same way, Dark Overrealm for me, this is it makes black more of a colour identity, and I think I personally rather have 5 colours in the game than 4, because you end up with more combinations of decks. And then I think Wormhole is quite a distinctive thing. If they only have it on black cards, then it makes black cards and Overrealm the stronger part of its identity. And using the weird universe sort of bits of it, rather than any other deck can kind of splash Overrealm, but having a dedicated Overrealm deck, I think I'd maybe a couple more cards of a Wormhole. I don't think it'd ever get broken, because so many decks now are playing cards for free, based on their leader anyway.
Yeah, possibly, but imagine you could play those cards for free and cards in your drop for free. I mean, we'll talk about Burst in a minute, but if nothing else, it'd be very easy to charge for Vegex to get 2 off in a turn. Now, obviously, the fact that one of the Demigras... In fact, no, you don't even spend your money, right? So, but you only get trigger the auto when you Overrealm. So you've spent your first Overrealm on the Demigra, and then you can get a second one. So, I guess it kind of balances itself there. But if you had a permanent Wormhole, I think that's too rife for abuse. I don't think they can go back and really do a lot with it.
No, obviously I don't think it should be able to ever go in the VJX deck, but it'd be kind of nice for the maybe enemy side of that conflict to be wormholey and about overrealm, and the VJX to be about milling yourself and then playing the cards for free. And then they sort of put cards in for free, but do it in a slightly different way.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Anybody got any other thoughts on Wormhole?
Not really, not for me at least.
All right. So in terms of populating your drop, burst. Right. So who's using burst cards?
Well, I have to say, so the very first deck I built when I started playing DBS, built online, of course, was a Yamcha deck, of what wanted to be at least a Yamcha deck, with the 100% Yamcha, I can't remember the full name of now, that has a burst 5 attached to it. And so that was my first real tries with the game, and that of course was the first time I saw that keyword burst, and I find it interesting even more when you can actually lose when you don't have any more cards in your deck. Yes, so it's a cost that's very, very light in a way. You just mill cards from your deck. It doesn't matter until you reach the very last card, really, because these cards could have just been at the very bottom of your deck. You would never have seen them, so it doesn't. At the same time, if you build your deck accordingly, maybe you get some cool cards that discard you, increase the chances of doing some cool stuff with your deck. And yeah, I find it interesting. It's not to be underestimated, because burst 5, for example, is quite a thing. It basically means that if you manage to trigger burst 5 3 times, you're getting really of your deck.
Vince, you're fading out. Like every 30 seconds, you're getting quieter and quieter. In fact, I can't even hear you anymore. Yes, really.
212, is it any better?
That's a little better, yeah.
Okay, that's odd. Sorry, do you want me to restart everything I was saying, or do you think we're good?
Well, I mean, we can maybe make it out, but you might want to just reiterate some of the key points.
Yeah. So very first deck I played was a burst deck with Yamcha, and ultimately that was my first time really getting in front of that keyword. I really liked it because it's a very light keyword. Just doesn't matter at all until you reach the last card. You can build around it to make it matter a bit more and get the cards you want in the discard pile, increase your chance of doing stuff. And I like it as a keyword. It's just mindful of it would be my advice, because burst 5, when you play it even 3 times per game, gets you really, really close to the end of your deck. I like it, and I'd like to see more of it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think bursting cards off the top of your deck as a resource is, a standard card game mechanic. I like it. I like using your discard pile as a mechanic, as long as it's balanced and they don't break it. Like I mentioned with Overrealm, I think they did a good job there. And obviously, Set 10 has brought Dredge Coup, as people are calling it, even though it has nothing to do with Dredge. But I think people are now trying to go for Mill Coup or Burst Coup or whatever. You know what I mean. And playing stuff you read discard with the Maidens event extra card. It's quite nice.
Yep. And certainly having cards in your drop is more important now than ever, I'd say. There's a lot more cards that interact from your drop. Either spend money, drop to warp, you'll draw a card or get a card back, or having cards in your bin that you can recur when the Shenron deck.
Funny you should say this, because a couple of keywords ago we were talking about Arrival and how people are playing the apes just to put Goku and Hit in play. And Matt challenged me to find a green card that was able to do anything similar to this.
Go on,
It just so happens that there's a card that lives very well in the drop that is green, and that you can make use of in any deck, which is the new Hasty Dispatch Dispo. So burst it to your drop and make use of it, and you'll be pretty happy about that.
Well,
yeah, but Hasty Dispatch Dispo doesn't do anything near as what the ape does. I'm sorry, but
no.
What about Rivian?
But rebrand is like green specific, right? You can't just put it in any color deck. And
Oh yeah, that's true because it costs two green to do it. Yeah.
My point was that the ape you can just put in any color deck, and it's not really a splash. It's
I get your point, and I don't think we'll get to a card that is the level of utility that the apes have.
Which was
I
my
still
point.
think, I still think you don't need a card of the level of the apes to justify running the good arrival cards next to it. There are enough cards in each single color that are good enough to do it. For the
what keyword does that card have? Right, moving on.
Right now, we're going burst. Right, back on burst.
Back on burst.
We'll
So my point for burst, yeah, I think it still gets a little bit of support. Like it's sort of an add-on for some cards. It does definitely help fuel the drop, which can then fuel further cards such as the apes. I think the fact that you've got you can have 60 card decks now makes burst a little more interesting. What you're saying there, Vince, with the burst 5 getting you close to death or decking out can be mitigated a little bit by having a larger deck, but then you lose some consistency. But just a card or two a set is enough to keep this relevant and keep it in power. And if my internet drops, that's because the rain has just started bucketing down.
I think, like this burst 5 thing, I think I'd quite like to see maybe more exploration of burst as a time limit on your deck. So you've got to do something faster because your bursting is a serious cost. Like burst 3 isn't a cost, right? Really, for shortening the game, it ends up being a resource. If you make a card that says burst 10 on it, that's a real cost. There's only a certain stage of the game that you could play that, and I think that would be quite interesting. Yeah,
definitely has to be something you can do with those 10 cards in your drop to make that worthwhile. Or
the card is just powerful enough that you can only basically play it once.
Fine.
Yeah. Burst is a cool keyword because it's a different type of cost. Makes, as Matt said, use a different type of resource, which is cards and deck. So it opens eyes for the game, and let's reach more of this.
Yeah, it could be a cost, but it's also a resource, right? And I think that's probably why it's really interesting.
Balancing act. Yeah. Oh, the other keyword that obviously interacts with the drop, primarily sparking. Came about. Did it start on the counter, please? Was that the first time sparking was used?
I don't know. You're the one that's looking through the repository of stuff, Barry.
So look, sparking. Maybe not the first time.
I think this is just whilst you're looking at that, Barry. My take on it is that it's quite a nice mechanic here because it gives a time limit a time constraint to when you can play cards. That's not based on energy, because a lot of cards are looking at when either you or your opponent have 3 energy, etc., to sort of delay their stage and when they can be played in the game. Sparking is kind of nice in that same way that it puts this sort of soft limit of what stage of the game are you playing before this card can be played. That isn't related to energy, so it's a nice little constraint on things. And then at the same time, the cost of it, having sparking cards, is that you can't really run Overwhelm quite as well, which is nice. When you're deck building, you're no longer defaulting to maybe those 3 cards just for your Overwhelm slot. Because you've got sparking to consider, and that a nice little constraint like that just increases variety. I'd like to see it on more cards. There aren't loads at the moment.
No.
Yeah.
Well, what you're saying there about the trade-off between sparking and overwhelm, I think is interesting. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's necessarily a stopper. It stops low value overwhelm. But if your finisher's an overwhelm card, the 10 overwhelm 10 cards, the Foos and the Miras, then that's still worth it in a sparking deck when you're going in for the win.
Yeah, which is nice, isn't it? You've got to sort of have that in the back of your head while you're building your deck. But I think it definitely could be utilised more.
Yeah, and perhaps even larger sparking numbers,
Yeah. I mean, what's VJX's sparking? Sparking 20?
20, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's quite a cool use of sparking. Either you have 20 cards or you lose.
Yeah, and I think the other big one's a 10 for the The Gogeta, right?
Yeah.
People
Just back in
revived.
turn,
Yeah. I don't think there's anything else as big as that.
No, I mean, they've got the Kaioken Son Goku from set 7, right, where it's
Oh, yeah.
10
That's
or
not
more.
sparking, right? But it's asking for cards.
Yeah,
in the
it's
drop.
similar.
Yeah.
It's basically sparking, but more.
It's an even more restricted sparking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bring back Boo. Nobody's playing that. Cool. Vince, you got anything on sparking?
No, same again. It's a keyword I like because it forces you to keep track of what happens in your drop area and therefore take ownership of that area as well. It's not something that you just dump cards in. So yeah, I like sparkling. Would like to see more of it.
All right, super.
I feel like I'm repeating myself quite much now.
It's fine. We can just. What I'm going to do is make a Vince sim board. Just push some buttons.
I like
What do
it.
you-
I want more of it.
What do you think of that, Vince? Oh, it's okay.
I like it. I want more of it. I'll take some.
Great apes aren't that good. Or
Great apes are great, but we can replace them by something else.
Super. Right, moving on. Because otherwise we'll never finish. Let's bundle up Blocker and Revenge together. Vince, you got anything on Blocker and Revenge?
That's how I find Blocker as being one of the key parts of the game as well. A bit like it's basically a negate, but negate on a battle card. That's basically what it is, and I find it interesting because it gives another aspect to it. It's a bit more fragile. Many things can happen to it before it actually can be triggered. So that's quite cool. Like strong blockers are really, really strong, and if anything, the 9-cost Shenron is really a good example of this. And Revenge is also really cool. I have to admit, Revenge I'm a bit less sure about because when it's on the small card, like a 5k blocker Revenge, I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Like you can see the trade-off. Like it's a cheat card that can have a nice comeback effect. That's technically weak, but can have a nice comeback effect. But when it's on a strong card, just like this 9-cost Shenron, then suddenly it can become a bit obnoxious. Like, well, you're gonna basically negate my attack, and you're gonna kill my card on top of it, and you're gonna stay there for the next round to do it again. It's a bit probably a bit much. So Revenge, I like it. I'm a bit mindful of how it's used.
Yeah, I think Blocker perhaps should have bundled up with the old crits and double strikes and dual attacks because it is a fundamental part of the game, right?
I sort of I think it's supposed to be, but for a long time I don't think it was. I think a lot of blockers just weren't played. I mean, they printed a lot of blockers that printed costs 2, but you could put them into play for free for X and Y and Z reasons, and none of them really saw play. And
Legic. Bodyguard Legic.
yeah, he saw a little bit, right?
Because it came out 1 if your opponent started, usually, for free, and he was a decent blocker.
But he was good because he was a free body as well, right? Which is a lot of the other ones are like 5k or something, which don't affect, offensively don't affect the board. And for a long time, I think blocker just wasn't really anything. And removal was so strong. Get rid of all the blockers. They don't, why play a blocker if it's just going to get removed straight away? It's not a negate. But I think Vince is right in that Shenron now, but that's a good blocker. Like blocker, I think in set 10 became a reasonable keyword to start looking at again. I think also in set 8, obviously you got Bulma, who had a lot of support for blocker as a theme. Obviously you don't play blocker cards. You're playing the leader that gets all your guys blocker, and then you can have a lot. An interesting defense that's quite different from negates, right? It's all on board, it's all in show.
Is Bulma an example of how weak blocker is? The fact you can give it to every card you're playing and it's not broken.
Yeah, exactly. It's not. It's never going to be an overpowered mechanic, but I think there's a lot of space for it to be interesting and build interesting decks. And I think they could look at it more. And I think Shenron is a good way of building a control deck, which is different from Invoker, but is still playing that long game. It's playing a big blocker, which is obviously got a chain. It's got it's not an evolved chain, but
A chain, yeah.
Yeah, it is a chain.
One of the auto chains. The interesting thing about what Vince was saying there the big 9-drop Shenron being too oppressive, a 30k revenge blocker, it really just forces you to kill it the first time round, because otherwise you're just going to stand back up again. So it's quite good that you can trade cards for. It's an interesting thing. Like, you go in with your biggest hitter and you trade 4 cards to get rid of it. So even though it's not stopping any further attacks, you've also got some value out of it. And whilst we're talking about revenge in context with blocker, it doesn't have to be on a blocker, right? It can be on a card you want to punish the opponent for attacking, and particularly killing.
It's rarely been on that card, right? There's an extra card that gives revenge under very specific.
No, it doesn't even really work anymore. The Vegeta surprise attack Vegeta or something.
Timing doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work the way you want it to, because revenge triggers before you can play the.
Oh yeah, okay, it's an auto keyword.
Yeah, so you'd have to play it during another one, during another battle, in order for it to do anything. At which point they probably won't attack it. So.
But yeah, it's actually quite true that if we've seen revenge on a card that you actually want to see out of the board, and that's not there to be defensive, like an impactful, so I don't know, an impactful Goku or something like that, triple strike Goku. We've never seen revenge on this type of cards.
Not really, nothing that big, I don't think. The box topper from set 8 had revenge.
Yeah, I think this is what. Right.
Toa Dimension Leaper. Do you have to pay the cost? Yes, you do. Right, moving on. What are you going to say, Matt?
You can really kill my train of thought there. Yeah, I think revenge is underutilized. I think blocker they made too weak, and now I think we're kind of getting back on where blocker needs to be in the game, because you don't want everything to have blocker and blocker to be the be all and end all of defense. But I think revenge is something they've underutilized and never really used it in a way that's kind of preventive in the way that barrier is, and it never is going to be, because if something has revenge, you're just going to find another way of removing it than attacking it. But it'd be nice to have maybe some cards that, if they're not attacked for a turn, you get a benefit. So, switch this card to rest mode, draw a card, something like that, and it's got barrier, so you could attack it and it's easy to attack, but it has revenge, so there's sort of like the cost of attacking it is losing one of your cards. But if it stays on the board, then they can keep drawing cards off it, and it'd be kind of nice to have maybe something preventative. And I mean, maybe not that exactly,
but something like that makes sense. I'm having a look at the strength of some of the cards of revenge, and there's just not much that you're really worried about. Certainly the Sim Shenron's the far and away the best version of it. There's a Cell that has double strike and can remove a combo card when it's attacking. There's a King Cold with double strike, 15k though. Yeah, I think revenge is certainly something else they could do with it.
And I think it'd be nice to put on utility cards that over a game provide a benefit, but at some stage the opponent probably has to put some resources into getting rid of it.
Yeah, it does feel like it's not going to be an easy balance to strike, the whole revenge fit, because it does feel like it's not going to be an easy one to strike. I would love to see it on cards that you want to get rid of, because today revenge mainly exists on cards that you don't really care about, and unless they have blocker, they are fairly irrelevant. But yeah, is there a blue cyan that has revenge that could work with Vegito? I'm not even sure.
Blue Cyan?
I don't think so. Well, you get my point. Like, revenge is kind of inconsequential today unless it's printed on a 9-cost Shenron, Sin Shenron. So yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Cool.
More of it would be good. Making it interesting would be a nice thing to have in the game, I think.
And I'm just thinking, like, the revenge, and coupled with the you must attack this card in rest mode.
Yeah, that would be really strong. I guess that's why I think the balance between the thing is revenge is card removal, and card removal is strong. So
But-
you have to really find the balance. It's not going to be an easy one, I think.
But the card removal is already really strong in this game, right?
Yeah, it is.
Exactly, and that's another one.
I think revenge and sort of concept is like, I present something to you and you have to expend resources to get rid of it. I think that's just quite a nice question for a game to ask, and presents an interesting line of play. Like, do you commit the resources to get rid of that card, or do you?
Absolutely. I mean, I agree. Asking the question and answering the question is definitely interesting. I'd be curious to do it. I'm not sure it's going to be easy to find a question.
Maybe.
All right. Cool. So something we'd probably like to see a bit more of. Let's move on to the next one. Bond. Right. So James Bond. Right. So Bond X. Let's talk about what Bond does. So it cards will have Bond written on it. Bond's a number usually, sometimes a trait. Number being the number of matching battle cards you need to trigger it, but it is inclusive of the card you're playing. So it could either be Bond's an X number of battle cards or X number of cards that share traits, and probably most commonly Namekian or Alien. But
Universe 7.
Some U7 stuff, yeah. It's not really widespread, but there are certainly some Bond cards. U7 Bond 007 classic. Right. Right, somebody take it away from me.
Is your water being spiked? Before we had this, you went and got water. Did you get something a bit stronger?
It's getting late.
Yeah. I think Bond is a bit underutilized, or at least not developed, and they've not kept up with it in the same way that they've managed to change Evolve and Fusion and all those we talked about before, and Arrival as well, and Overrealm. Each of those ones have been kept up with each set, whereas Bond, they sort of did a little bit a while ago, developed that as a deck, then that deck fell off and they've kind of just forgotten about it. But I think, a theme of Dragon Ball is like working together, combating the enemy together. Is it like that's definitely an underlying theme of some of the story arcs? So I think it'd be nice to have that in the game, just from a thematic point of view, especially with like Namekians, Universe 7. I think thematically it's a nice thing to have. Having cards that rely on having other cards on the battlefield, obviously with removal being so strong in this game, is always going to be an issue, and they've got to be strong enough. Like Alliance as well, when we discussed that. The card you're playing that has Alliance has to be strong enough for you to justify having a wide board, and not just a wide board that's swinging a load of 15k attackers, which I think sort of the current meta is a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's sort of a wide board that's kind of building to something maybe bigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense stuff to me. Vince, you?
I like Bond. I find it interesting what they've done with Bond, because to me it's very reminiscent of the trait decks that you can have in other games, whether you're thinking, I don't know, elves in... Sorry, I need to shut the window as well. So whether you're thinking elves in Magic, or I don't know, up House Butley in Thrones or whatever, and they managed to do that without falling into the trap of the multiplier effect, like this card gains plus X power, where X is the number of whatever, Namekian, Warrior of Universe 7, blah, 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 that you would have in play. I like that Bond mechanic where the card in question gains skill or gains something when there are others with its trait next to it. I like that, and I like that they didn't fall in the trap of what I think is the trap of the multiplier, the X thing on a card. So I do like Bond for this. I don't know that it should see a lot of play, because I'm very happy with Namekian and Universe 7 having that theme of Bond. There certainly would be others that you could do, like Defenders of the Earth or something like this. But I don't know, I like Bond. I find it cool as a niche keyword. More to do with it. There will be always more to do with it. Like, it's fairly easy to print on a card and be like, yay, any other Freezer's armies, Bond Freezer's armies, and blah blah blah. Using more of it, I believe, is unnecessary today.
Yep. I mean, I'm going to just go a little off tangent because why not? We're here now. What you were saying about you like the no X multipliers. But there was just sprung to mind a couple of examples. The Bibbidi super combo, kind of an X multiplier. And what's the Vegeta or the Vegito that gets plus 3k for each energy?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm very aware that these cards exist. Don't mind me, but they're not obnoxious. Like, it's not all your cards gain plus X, blah blah blah, and stuff like that. So that works fine by me. I mean, I'm fine with these ones. I'm just thinking about other card games I've played before, where you have this mechanics of all your Earthlings gain plus 5, where X is blah blah blah.
Yeah,
see what I mean? Yeah, that's the type of things I'm quite happy they didn't fall in.
Yeah, Bond is a binary thing, right? It either has this or it doesn't, and then if you have more of it, it doesn't get out of control.
Yeah, it's a fixed improvement. But yeah, there's definitely not a lot of these, but they do seem to get the odd card and the odd decent card. I mean, what was the draft box one? Was that there was a Piccolo, right? Piccolo assimilated ability.
Yeah.
Pretty decent. And what was the one that was slightly worse? There was another Piccolo that came out just after that. I can't remember. But it's something that could be expanded upon, like I said. I mean, what you're saying, the value of having a wide board that isn't just 15k bodies could be, I mean, to tie it back into my earlier talk, and then wouldn't be as, Vince wouldn't find it very thematic, but if you build up like a board of weenies, right, that can overwhelm an opponent, like, Bond 6, this card gains victory strike and 10k power, having to defend, 6 attacks that could kill you if you let anyone through as a reward for building up a 6-card board. And it would have to be of suitable difficulty to do so. It would be the equivalent of playing your bomb, but something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a nice sort of spirit bomb sort of theme, right? It's that everyone brings their energy together, and then you win.
Boom! There you go. Done. Let's build it.
Bond spirit bomb, and it just takes hours and hours of building up, but then at the end just blows off the tail of the villain and this nonsense.
That would be a really cool thing to give this a victory strike to a card. Like, under certain circumstances, like Bond 7 of Universe 7 or Earthling, something like this, and it gains victory strike or something like this. That would be fun.
Yeah, something like Bond 7 Earthling, give a saying card in your battle area a victory strike.
Well, yeah.
But theoretically, Bond should be quite good, right? Because most cards you're playing have a function that lead you up towards winning, right?
Yeah.
Mid-range bodies on the board, decent bodies on the board exists, but Bond's something you're doing anyway. You're playing cards. If you can keep cards on the board, you're winning. So it could become a win more type situation. So finding that balance is quite interesting.
That's the balance, right? It is a win more card, like you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head there, yeah.
So we'll have to see. But that's all I've got on Bond, unless anybody's got anything else.
No, I think I might mention it later when we talk about sort of the last one on our list. But
yep, fine. Let's throw out Energy Exhaust. I've not got much to say on Energy Exhaust, but just that I hope it continues to be on every multicolour card in the future.
Yeah, obviously the first time we have the getting rid of the energy exhaust, I mean, that's the sort of interesting bit about this keyword, like you said, making all the dual energy tapped, or rest mode, or whatever it is called in this game. It's a brilliant sort of way of balancing it. And then obviously they brought out the people are calling them check lands, but the ones that come into play in active mode, if you already have a dual colour one in your energy, it's quite nice. Yep. I think they maybe went to the obvious design too quickly and made those, like, in some ways the default. Like, where do you go from that in regards to sort of developing this as like an interesting bit of design space? And they released the gods in Draft Box 5. So you talked about the colour pair keyword ones, and then the counterpart ones have their energy exhaust when you warp one card of each colour from your drop area, that they come into play. in active mode. But like, are those better than the ones we already had? They're reasonably
Well,
equivalent.
it depends if you want to. Sometimes it's hard to find those checklands.
Yeah.
So having, running multicolor cards, having your 4 checklands, and having maybe 2 of the angels, destructive angels or destroyer angels, whatever it was, could be the core part of a multicolor deck. I don't know if they'll. Doesn't seem to be going that way at the moment. I don't think people are playing it like that. But yeah, it's more interesting. And what you're saying there ties back into using your drop as a resource again. Anything that kind of ties into that's a bit more interesting.
Yeah, it might just be that those angel rares came out at a point where the game just shifted to monocolor decks, so no one's playing them. But I also think, when the fact that they made them of such a high rarity, that it's just, are they better than the other ones? Probably not. Like, are people going to play them? Like, I mean, obviously, people buy cards and can afford to play the game, but
experience, I have to admit, I do like these. So first on energy exhaust, totally agree. It's a good way of balancing multicolor cards. I agree with Matt rather. I do think they brought out the checklands very quickly after, and that kind of killed the drawback in a way, because today, like, you're basically gonna charge a multicolor card turn 1 when you can still afford to do it when it comes into play now. And because the side of the deck and having 4 copies of a card makes it so that most of the time you'll have a checkland turn 2 or 3 afterwards to play. You basically just negate the energy exhaust, the impact of energy exhaust. Although, like, it put a constraint of your deck on your deck building. That's for the energy exhaust. That being said, on the Guardian Angels, can you still hear me?
yeah.
Okay. On the Guardian Angels, I do like them a lot, and when I do build multicolor decks, they are definitely in it. 4-2 is generally the split I go for. 4 checklands to Guardian Angel. I'm thinking about going 3-3 because depending on how early in the game you need to be active, the checklands are really good. Like them a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the angel rares might be better than I'm estimating. It might just be that the meta shifted so that no one's really tested them as much.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes total sense.
But I think in future, how much more design space they have a way of bringing a card in active mode based on other factors. It's quite limited, so we might just see these kind of reprinted, and maybe that's fine. Does energy need to be interesting?
Well, it's a whole other area.
Yeah.
It's one of the sections off the game board, effectively. Speaking of which, fields. So whilst fields are a type of card, they're also a keyword, right? Because every field has field printed on it.
Yep.
Another green one. I mean, there's not a huge number of fields in terms of how many cards are printed. There's about 30 or so. And they've never really gone away, but I don't think they've ever specifically been pushed apart from onto a single leader or a single archetype. A couple of exceptions, maybe Frieza's Army Healing Pod supports some green things.
Yeah, Frieza's Army Healing Pod is just one that kind of does something good under what used to be a specific condition, which is now probably more accessible. So then it just gets played because it's not locked to anything apart from playing green cards from your bin, and then now green is playing more cards from its bin than it used to.
I mean, looking at them
in the fields, like, it's not. In some ways, I quite like that. It's not an aspect of the game that every deck's having a field, and if you don't have a field, then your deck's not working. And they specifically work with individual leaders. That gives that sort of those style leaders a little bit more of a unique spin to them. I think Android 21 is probably the best example of that. It puts the field card into play at the start of the game, and that field card changes the whole dynamic of the game. Putting clone cards into your opponent's battle area, using those as a resource, making sure that the first card played in each turn is not able to attack. Completely changes the way of the game, and field cards are really powerful, and they should be used like this, but they shouldn't be everywhere. And I guess in Android 21's position, it kind of makes your leader's text box bigger. And if anything that Bandai needs, it's more space to put text and cards, because they love putting text and cards.
It's your favourite.
Yeah, to use a comparison, it's basically an agenda that you're adding to your leader, just like a side card that says, hey, it also does this in this way. I do like fields, like, because they're not too popular. Like, if there were a lot of fields around in the meta, it could probably become a bit annoying to play against, because you need to fill in the empty field cards. I guess you can always sideboard them, but yeah, like as Matt said very rightly, like the fields are basically a bigger, most of the time, a bigger Xbox for your leader. So like, to me, they basically just bring their cool stuff.
Yeah, I think also in deck building, they do prevent a little bit of interesting opportunity, because if you're not including a way to search for one out your deck, like your leader card specifically, or the game is specifically designed to support you to go and find that field card, like the new Broly chain is, and the old Broly stuff where it's putting it in the bin and into play the Broly's ring and collar.
Yeah.
If there are sort of more generic ones, you are giving up sort of space in your deck to put them in, and then once you find one of them, having more of them isn't good. You can't combo them, you can't play them again. They're sort of dead cards, and obviously Dragon Ball, there's no real dead cards because you can always put them in your entry, so the payoff is the sort of space you're giving up is kind of less than maybe in another game. But I think, that's definitely something interesting about field cards.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk about field cards in context of the new Unisims, right? Because that's really not focusing on the keyword; it's focusing on the area, more than anything else. Like I'm just having a look at the cards. I mean, I would probably argue that the two most meta, or maybe the three most meta ones, the Broly one, right? I mean, the Broly
Dormant potential.
The control mechanism and or ring. Tournament of Power Arena, obviously.
Yeah.
Invoker. And then Dormant Legend is interesting because you don't even want to play it.
No, you want it in the bin, yeah.
So I'm looking at the others, like, sure, I mean, they enable certain decks, but they're not really decks that are super competitive. Although, going forward, the Planet Vampa, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's a nice space for them to have to make some decks have a different texture to other decks.
I mean, there's one field that might be a bit underplayed. I believe that's the Planet Vegeta that lets you search for a sign, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it has a place. It's in some decks, but not. It's giving up those slots again. And if it doesn't feel worth it to put it in your deck, I mean, Planet Vegeta sees some play, right? Because it's only because the supporting cards, which is the Great Apes, can do a lot. So you need that kind of support for a field to really do something, and that kind of generic support as well. I mean, it's not super generic because obviously it relies on Great Ape cards, but it doesn't have to go in a particular leader. It doesn't have to go in a deck that only has 50 specific that work.
It's basically, if you don't have enough with 4 copies of a card in your deck and you want a 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th one, you can basically put the Planet Vegeta in and just go get that Saiyan that you needed. Yeah. I don't know if I don't think it sees a lot of play. I can't think of a Saiyan right now that would be so key to your deck. Not even all the good things.
I think someone posted a list of Gohan revamp leader, the triple strike turn 2 one. One of them had it in to go and search for one of the self-awakeners. Yeah, I looked at that list and I was just like, what is going on here? But I think it did quite well in a tournament. I can't remember which one it was. It might have been one of the Gen Con lists.
All right, fair enough.
I mean, one of the cool things of this is also, like, if ever, you can just go and fetch one of your super combos. Provided your super combo is a Saiyan.
True. Cool. I mean, fields, get more of them, make them a bit more impactful, interesting. one of the newest keywords, unique New York. Now, obviously, we've had sort of limit 1 in your battle area cards before, but now they've made it a keyword, and this is a keyword that starts in most other games. Are you happy that they added it, Vince?
I'm just pretty unaffected by it because it already existed before. Now it's there. I just hope they won't take the opportunity of having it as a keyword to print loads of it, which they seem to be doing. But yeah, like I'm fine. I did like the fact that there was no unicity before, and you could have many cards in it. No, that's yeah. I don't have much else to say. I'm pretty unaffected by this keyword.
I mean, I don't understand why it took them so long, and I think in some ways it's just giving them license to print more text on cards because they don't have to put in that one line about you can only have one copy on, then 20 other lines of text. Now you can have 21 lines of text.
There we go, boom. I mean, that's just an opportunity to.
It's just a limiting factor on a card, right? It stops cards being overly powerful because you can't play more than one knockout, and I think that's quite a nice thing to have in a game. Like Vince said, there's something nice about Dragon Ball, and that uniqueness wasn't a thing before, coming from games that I played previously where uniqueness was a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that's a bit odd, what I hope it won't do is give them a license so to print more of them. That would be my flavor, my opinion on this, and to print more powerful cards because they're unique. That I would say. It's a bit like Ultimate, which I guess is a keyword we'll come on to pretty soon as well, where like it's basically. Sorry.
Probably next.
Do you mind if we kind of mix the conversation between unique and ultimate then?
Sure.
Let's just do a really smooth segue, right? Yeah. Everyone, listeners, this is a really smooth segue into ultimate.
Excellent. I'll put the chapter starting now. The thing with ultimate is so only one copy of the card in the deck. That's the type of things I really dislike. It hasn't hit me too much in DBS. I guess designers have been a good work to design these cards, but that to me adds a lot of variance. Like if there's one card that's so powerful, and that's generally what an ultimate is for, that when you play it, you really win the game. And whether you see it or not makes a big difference on your chances of actually winning the game, regardless of your level of play. And that I find a bit sad and unique, although I totally understand where it is like stage 1 of the ladder towards ultimate. And that's what I would be a bit mindful of with seeing more unique keywords being printed. I realize I took kind of a way around there. Does it make sense?
Yeah. I think that's definitely a concern with unique now that it is keyworded, that if it does become more prevalent, is it just a license for them to print more overpowered cards, which I think in Dragon Ball is maybe something I shouldn't be worried about because that's all they ever do. Every card in this game seems overpowered, right?
Yeah, true.
If everything's overpowered, nothing's overpowered.
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely think that's part of the philosophy of this game. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you in this one, Vince, that Ultimate, I think from a game design standpoint, it's just really bad. Just why would you design a game where it basically increases variance over skill? Like that's what Ultimate does from a card. You're making the card so powerful that you can only include one of, so that if you just draw that card, then that negates the skill of the other player. That seems like a really bad way of designing a game. Like games should be about skill, more about skill in my opinion than they are about look. I do like look and variance, just keep things fresh. But
then, like people could argue that if you know it's in the game, that you can play around it. But yeah,
but the problem is they make the ultimate cards so strong that you can't play around them. And I think the set 10 ones seem less ridiculous than before. I think Salzeno is just nonsense. It's like absolute nonsense as a card. Like playing it for free, it's just disgusting. Whereas I think the most recent ones seem a little bit less. They've ramped them down a little bit more. There's more ways of interacting with them. They're less difficult to interact with. I mean, like Victory Strike, not being able to negate skills, not being able to negate his attacks, it's just like, once they get that out, you lose. Whereas I think later on now you can negate them. I mean, the Gogeta, people, once you play that out, you can't play other battle cards, you can't combo with battle cards in your battle area. Like, that's got a real downside to it. And I think that's quite well designed.
That's more interesting, I agree. It still has the ultimate keywords on it, but hey.
Yeah, I think they've kind of balanced that sort of like swinginess with that true, like, a reasonable downside.
True.
Well,
yeah, absolutely.
So unique being a thing's fine by me. I don't necessarily agree that it's a license to print overpowered cards, but it should stop oppressive cards by having multiple of them. You're still going to see, you can still have 4 of them. You're still going to see them, so they can't be so strong that they're game enders. But it does stop you triggering the same thing multiple times. And then somewhere in between unique and ultimate, there's a little bit of design space for characters named. This, you can only have one character named Android 21 in play, which might restrict some other sort of combinations that could become too powerful as well. But again, you're not going to keyword that, and it's going to take up text space as well. So
yeah, that's going to be hard. I believe here the 3 of us in this call on this podcast probably see where you're going with unicity and how there should be a drawback to it, further than not being able to do another copy of that card.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it's gonna happen in DBS. Doesn't mean it's just changing the rules, basically.
You never know, right? I mean, who saw unisons coming? But
right.
Yeah.
And the last thing, so on ultimates as well, like, I mean, I kind of get that from like a player point of view, a business point of view. The chance of having a play set of secret rares, right? Because that's what ultimate. There's only ultimates on secret rares. It's quite low, so it makes sense only allowing 1, because otherwise people would be wanting a play set. You'll get some people that can afford a play set of secret rares versus people that definitely can't. So it kind of makes some sense there having only 1. I know. Yeah. Well, it's not untrue.
That's very true. It's a perspective I hadn't thought of before, how it links with the release model of the game. And yeah, that's definitely very true. Like, if there wasn't ultimate on this card and there were still SCRs, it would be really, really hard for anyone to get their hands on it.
But I definitely agree. Having this overtune card that relies on luck to see it is one of the few bad areas of design in this game, or like sort of the baked in design of this game. What I maybe not a solution necessarily that I came up with, but I would almost rather there was an ultimate area, right? So started revealed, or maybe not revealed, but revealed at the start of the game and always accessible, right? That you don't have to draw it; it's there. People can see what you're building towards, and they know what's coming, kind of thing. Now, I mean, you know what's coming anyway, right? But as soon as you sit down and see what the deck is. But it was a problem in pre-Homecoming Gwent, right? There was a card advantage spies. So if a game of 3 rounds, and if you won the first round and you played your card advantage spy and they didn't have their card advantage spy, you went into the last round with a 2 card advantage. And you don't draw cards in Gwent apart from between rounds. So either you saw it and you won, or you went down cards in round 3. And one of the solutions there was to have permanent access to your spies, and when to play it was of more interest, like whether it was rounds 1, 2, or 3. So I mean, it's an option. Like, yes, you've got an ultimate single use card, but you've always got access to it. And there eliminates the luck element of whether you drew it or not. Could be a design space.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. And I think there are, as much as obviously before I dislike ultimates and secret rares, they do offer a time limit to the game. The game can only go so long until someone plays it and then they just win. And that's kind of nice that the game will end at some point and not just keep grinding on.
And draw on forever, yeah.
Yeah. I think they do have that as like an upside of why they're in the game and sort of what benefit they add.
And they do bring excitement when you open a booster or a box as well. Like there'll be that sweet SCR or not.
I'll exhaust 5. Oh, no. But there's also some opportunity for having an anti-ultimate deck, something that rewards you for not having an ultimate card. It might open up, you may include these 4 cards, which are of a lesser power level, but still above the curve. If your deck does not include an ultimate, something like that could be another option.
Ultimate quarter.
Yeah.
I haven't been in big tournaments enough, thanks COVID. That's ironic, of course. Sarcastic? Yeah, one or the other. I haven't been in big tournaments enough to really realize, like, basically any top decks at a big tournament, I'm thinking 100 plus players, any top decks in top 32 will each have one ultimate in them, right? It's part of the deck building rules in a way, a bit like Super Combo.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of any that wouldn't run.
I'd have to look through the list, but there might be some, because, I mean, I don't know if Start Freezers win anything, but that can't really run a secret rare. There just isn't one really available to it, apart from... no, can't play that. Saying it can play the Dragon, and it can play the Dark Dragon Balls.
Or Select Xeno, isn't it?
Vince, you're breaking up again.
Oh, sorry. Select Xeno, maybe?
Yeah, you can play Zelda now, yeah.
To fit that in. Right, moving on from ultimates. And Vince, check your audio.
Yeah.
So we definitely got over the hump here. So let's just talk about one of the last keywords, and that's Warrior of Universe 7. So a weird skill, keyworded skill, that's only on leaders, and only 7 leaders at that. Bit interesting they even bothered to keyword it.
What do you mean?
Well, like, why they could have easily... There's plenty of space on a leader card to say what it does.
Oh.
So just to explain, I guess, that Warrior of Universe 7 lets you play Universe 7 cards as if they had no specified colour. Is that right?
Yes,
Yep,
no specified
exactly.
cost, yeah.
Yeah.
But same
Specified
as Agents of Destruction Leader, right? The new Barbty one. That has the same text, but for different...
Well, yeah, I mean, what I was trying to argue there is, Warrior could have been the keyword, and then, Warrior Universe X or Warrior Trait.
Yeah.
Something like that. I mean, opening up Warrior of Universe X for U6, U2, U9, open up some possibilities.
Well, that's very true. That might have been very, very forward thinking of them, and they must have thought of it. I'm a bit surprised they didn't. But ultimately, when you see Warrior of Universe 7 first, it's really cool. And I mean, it's a really cool keyword in itself. We could talk about the Agents of Destruction, which basically does the same. And on that type of mechanics, I'm having a really good time playing. So I like the idea of playing multicolored cards and building this type of decks. This opens this alleyway a lot more easily, of course. It often comes with leaders that are a bit subpar apart from this, which I think is a good drawback.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like I do like this keyword, whether you call it Warrior of Universe 7 X or you call it Agents of Destruction in their names, blah blah blah. I do like it. Yeah, I do like it. I like the building it opens, and I like the variety it brings to the game.
Like, I'm definitely up for something that mashes cards together that wouldn't otherwise work. Particularly when we're talking about, sort of the whole thing about how Bandai come back and reprint things in different colours. Like being able to mix and match blue blues and red blues and black blues and would be interesting. But you got to be careful that what they've done to define the color pies and the color wheel, and not taking into account the combinations because there was no real way of playing them together, is a difficult one to balance. So maybe Universe 7's whole thing's been balanced around potentially getting played out one of these leaders, whereas other universes haven't. So maybe that's why we've not seen it in anything else.
Yeah, and just
I'm not-
thematically, what mattered. Are the universe is really that important to the story? The protagonist of the story is Universe 7, Goku. The rest of them are just side characters for Goku to fight. So you don't need to keyword the other ones. You just need to keyword the one that Goku is involved in.
Fair enough.
Like, that's probably why they've keyworded this one and not the other ones, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
completely agree. And I mean, having the good guys, the heroes of the game, just working all together, and having only them being able to do that is also really cool. Like, it fits the narrative.
well, Universe 6 aren't bad guys.
I mean, they're the antagonists, right, in one of the arcs.
Well, there were some bad guys in there.
And you could argue that Frost is up to something good, to something bad. He's up to no good. There you go.
Right, let's come on to so getting towards the end. Let's talk about the worst keyword in the game.
Best one.
In the game.
Two keywords.
Two keywords.
They felt like they needed two specific keywords for this one thing.
It's just so terrible.
It was so important to this set that they were like really sold it. I think this is kind of when I started buying in. I played a bit more 7 and before that the Shenron sort of time, like with you and Ben. But I started buying in this set, and in the promotional material they were definitely pushing heroic and villainous as important parts of the cycle. I felt, or at least in their PR stuff.
Yeah, and what a disappointment.
And has anyone ever seen any of these keywords trigger?
Nope.
Like,
Not once.
I mean, obviously none of us played loads and loads, and we're probably not the best.
It's never been anything meta.
Like, yeah,
It's not even fun to play.
No, it just doesn't do anything. So what heroic does is, if you have a heroic card in play and you play another heroic card, then you draw a card, and then you can't use the skill for the rest of the turn. Villainous is the same, but it discards the opponent discards a card. Yeah?
Yeah, brilliant.
And but why is this a keyword? And also, if you look at the cards it's on, it's in a card from one from each colour, and then one black card.
Yeah, an extra black card that technically triggers them.
Yeah, and I don't think any of the cards are particularly pushed. One of the heroic cards is got like the unique keyword text, so you can't play it and then play another one out to have it, happen in the same colour.
And they're not cheap either.
They're all like 3 or 4 costs without ways of cheating them out, right? Which at that time was pretty big. I think now people more like to play maybe a 4-cost card like a Boonie, but when set 8 was coming out, people weren't spending 3 and 4 NG really on cards. I don't think. It's like,
Not on cards that do nothing.
Not on cards that do nothing. Yeah, not on a card that you pay 3 NG for and then have to pay another 3 NG card to draw one card.
Oh, the power levels. So there you go. If anybody ever talks to you about power creep, just show them villainous and heroic.
8 cycles in, and this is what they've come up with.
Both keywords, heroic and villainous, are two keywords I'm like, are going to put other cards that have these keywords, and finally it's going to come around and make something. Because today, the only one that's barely playable is the Vegeta Prideful Hero that can come into play for free if you put on the bottom of your deck a Bulma battle card. Even then, that's one.
But you need a second one to trigger it.
Yeah.
Or you need the heroic strike that today really doesn't do much.
And the Vegeta, you can't play another copy in the same turn, is that correct?
That's actually very true.
I don't know if it is.
It'll be dead by the time you get any value.
Yeah. I mean, you could also have play Vegeta one turn and play another Vegeta the turn after and trigger heroic.
I mean, you could. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying you wouldn't want to. The heroic and villainous were keywords in another game, Call of Cthulhu. CCG, FFG, LCG. All the G's.
brings us-
But it was very different. I thought it might be something quite similar. You couldn't have heroic and villainous cards in the same deck, without some exceptions. Or at least you couldn't have them in play at the same time. So I was expecting something along those lines, that you'd have to build a good guy's deck or you'd have to build a bad guy's deck, and it would reward you for having, certain traits in your deck or something like that. And then it turns into this, and you're like, what?
Yeah, they're definitely quite, what's the word? Evocative words, aren't they? Heroic, villainous. This is very much like Dragon Ball to its core. Like, there's the heroes and there's the villains. Every season, here are the heroes, here are the villains. Heroes win, move on. Heroes transform, get a power up, and win. And then they do this, and it just has like nothing. It's just, God, it's disappointing. And I thought maybe we'll get, like Arrival. They've kind of, since that's come out, they've supported it every set, released one or two Arrival cards, Overrealm, 1 or 2 Overrealm cards each cycle. But Heroic and Villainous is like, they could have easily put this in each cycle, just one card, and then slowly you might end up with like a heroic deck. But no, they just seem to have abandoned it straight away.
Yeah.
One of the other things with both these keywords is like the disappointment at understanding the card is magnified by how cool the cards actually look. Like
yeah.
they all have
really great.
They all have like a dedicated template without the background of the text box, the proper full arts. It's full arts. It's it's really, really cool cards. Like every time I see them, like, I want to play him. It looks so powerful. And then I read it, I'm like, oh yeah, it's true.
Is the Piccolo good? Is that the good Piccolo, or is it a different Piccolo that's good?
Probably a different Piccolo.
No, that one used to be okay, I think. Used to be able to, blow up one of your own cards to blow up one of theirs, which wasn't bad. But maybe I'm confusing it with the draft box Piccolo.
That's wrong. But yeah, I said I don't find any of them really good. When I go through the series like that, each heroic and villainous, like one of each has come into play. There's one of them that has a come into play card for not free but cheap. And but that's really about it. Like, there's no card I can see here that you really want to play. They don't exactly have traits that you can easily take advantage of, and most of them, as you said, cost 4 anyway. So if you can't chip them in, you basically won't be playing them.
Yeah, and I think
And
this is kind of what sparked the discussion when we decided to sort of look at keywords, and we got the new set spoilers out, and we've got Overlord and Servant, which we'll have a look at in a bit. And my first reaction when I saw these was, is this just going to be heroic and villainous? Because I think Bandai are, guilty of doing a new mechanic and then just abandoning it. And, I'd say heroic and villainous are definitely good examples of something called a parasitic mechanic, where they only work with things in their cycle and don't interact with the rest of the card pool. And until we get more heroic and villainous cards, that's the case. And they don't seem to have shown any indication that they're going to print more of these. And I think Overlord and Servant is going to be the same sort of thing. And I think Bond as well, maybe, falls in that same category, where it's like Bond X trait. Yeah, if it only fits in that cycle, then the keywords really aren't building on sort of that Bond mechanic. But maybe if they'll revisit Namekian's bonds and Uva 7 bonds, because I think thematically those kind of fit together. But the rest of the keywords we've kind of looked at, a lot of them aren't really these kind of parasitic mechanics. They're kind of generally quite good. They kind of fit in a variety of different decks. Sometimes they form decks. Like Invoker is in some ways a parasitic mechanic, even though it only works with.
Well, that's because we kind of think there's only really one deck that can support it, right?
But the rest of the keywords I think we've sort of discussed and gone through, they've built the mechanics of the game, whereas heroic and villainous are just not really adding anything.
Yeah, that's quite true. And I'm not sure there's much more we can say about heroic and villainous like that. It probably is actually a good segue into the Overlord Servant, the most recent segment of this podcast.
Finally, what everybody's been waiting for.
And it was a really nice, subtle, natural segue, Vince.
Thank you. I'm practicing.
Well, right. So has everybody seen it? So overlords. I mean, we just have to establish what they do. Servant cards are cards that don't restand. Is that right?
During the
They get plus
Ring-
10k, and they don't untap during your
So
charge phase.
is the plus 10k a built-in thing
Yes.
for servant, or just the fact that all servants have it?
It's part of the servant keyword, as far
Okay, fine.
as I'm aware.
And then overlord can do something with. Do they all put them to the bottom?
Yeah, I think Overlord itself just puts a servant keyword card onto the bottom of your deck, and you draw a card.
Okay, so now we've established kind of what it does.
I'm pretty sure that's what they do, and I don't think they do anything else, and that's why I was like looking at Heroic and Villainous and being like, these seem quite similar.
Yeah, I mean, what I like more about Servant and Overlord is that there's proper interaction between one and another. It also fits into the more I'm missing my words now. The more narrative behind the whole Babidi mind control type of things. So like I can see why it exists. I can see how it serves a very specific mechanic for a dedicated part of the background of the license. I'm quite happy with that. I just hope it's not going to be too strong. It doesn't seem that it's going to be at the moment. But I guess it still remains to be seen how potent this will ultimately be on it.
Yeah, I don't know if we've seen all the cards yet for Overlord Servant.
We've seen all the red and green ones, right?
Have you seen them all? Definitely. There's
Yeah,
not
I think
any.
so.
Okay.
What we can tell is we've only seen red and green cards for that.
There's going to be yellow. No, the 5-cost garlic that's in the next set has Overlord, so it's going to be supported in yellow.
There you go.
I think it's in them all because it was the only new keywords they kind of highlighted, right? I like it in theory, but what Matt's saying there, if it's limited to just cards in Vermilion Tide or whatever this new set's called, Unison Warrior 2, then that's a problem. I think Servant is actually the more clever of the two. A single use card that then you have to find some other way of making into a resource or spending resources to reuse it is pretty interesting. You know, it gets the power boost without any additional support. It's a one-time use, so that kind of ties back into like the uniques we're talking about there. In fact, even more restrictive than unique. It's a single use card. But Overlord is bad because there's a bunch of other cards that will already interact with those servant cards and offer opportunities to get rid of them, right? So blue can pick them back up. Green might sack them to force the enemy to sack something. If it was just down the whole time, you might want, depending on what was there, the Gohan that lets you combo rested cards, stuff like that, right? There's a bunch of ways to deal with a card that you're never going to get to use again. But if Overlord does have to exist, then yeah, cool, it's an extra way to interact with those servant cards. But allowing them to act on any card, if the only benefit is getting a draw, would be a strong ability, something that have to be balanced. But it would be much better than only able to do it with servant cards. It just has to have an additional use outside that sort of dyad in the force, right?
Yeah,
so,
they are quite limiting, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
go on.
It's the keyword in itself is fairly limiting, and I get your point that sacking a card to draw a card, like today, there will be often or in specific colors better use of this, but like once you put it in perspective or in the context of the card and the synergy between these cards and the others, then like it kind of makes sense. The Overload cards basically only are used in Overload in 7 decks, right? They are not going to be used outside of these decks. Therefore, like Overload is not just Overload as the keyword; it's Overload plus whatever other text there is on the card.
Yeah, and it's like a limited, in terms of deck building, it's limited as well. I mean, the thing with the servant cards, you can still use them in other ways, right? So let's say blue, you play your freezer, you pick it back up, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that can still happen, and you can play servant cards outside Overlord decks, but you can't play Overlord cards outside servant decks.
Yeah,
Okay, I get your point.
it seems weird to not have the servants in using Overlord. Like, obviously the Green Vegeta leader that we've seen, the Barbary one has Overlord, and I think that leader seems strong enough maybe without it, and it's just like a little extra bit that they're putting on cards to give them a little bit of a boost. Maybe that's enough. It's quite nice.
I think Overlord on leaders is decent.
Yeah. I would say about the servant thing that having the plus 10k power in the keyword is kind of bad templating, because you look at a card, oh, it's got 20k, but actually no, it's 30k because it's got plus 10k. You know,
Well, theoretically, you could blank a card.
Yeah, you can blank the cards, but just from like the cards are already hard enough to read as is. Like, no,
Yeah.
I find that in this game, like it's very hard to understand what some of the cards do because the templating is just poor. And so like someone swinging at you with a 20k card, you go, okay, that's a 20k card. I'll not negate it. And then you know, oh no, it's got the servant card, but you know, in that small little text box, so it's actually 30k card. That's like, it's easy to miss that during a game, especially like whilst we're in the Vermilion Bloodlines meta, it's probably fine. But 2 metas down the line and someone plays a servant card on you, it's very easy to miss.
It's quite true from a user experience perspective. It can be quite confusing and a bit detrimental. But there is, was it with you that we were talking about that, Matt? Maybe it was Barry?
Yeah, I was talking about it yesterday.
Yeah, and how the fact that it's in the keyword also means that it makes the card kind of reachable for counterplays. Because if the card had natively plus 10k and say that Vegeta that I'm looking at instead of being 20 was 30k, then there's a lot of counterplays that suddenly wouldn't apply to it.
Yeah.
And it certainly buffs it in a very different fashion.
Yeah, I think that offers like that plus 10k in that way does offer something, you know, the counterplay aspect. It doesn't stop all the red counterplays being really bad because now all the cards are 30k instead of 20k, because that's the thing that red relies on, right, is cards of specific power rather than like green, which is looking at energy cost.
Yeah.
And so
anyway,
it
could still be interesting, you know, we'll have to give it a try.
Yeah, I think overall, like, it's fine. I wonder if there's going to be any payoffs for it, you know, like if anything's going to interact with it in more than the
Unison Warrior cycle.
Yeah.
Or even outside Unison Warrior 2, right? Because it didn't come out in the first one.
If it outside of that, but also just outside of like putting one of those cards on the bottom of your deck to draw a card. I mean, it's fine, but it's not.
Well, there is the King Cold that if it's a 3 cost, you can.
I mean, I don't think that Servant and Overlord is going to see action further than Unison Warrior 2 of Vermilion Bloodline. Yeah. And I'm absolutely fine with it because I do think it's a combination of keywords that's there just to give a flavor, just to a very specific deck and to try to match, of course, the lore of the license behind it. And I'm very fine with this. Like, that's another deck that can exist. Whether it's going to be dominant or not, at least in Vermilion Bloodline, is another question, and even more further a few metas down the road. And yeah, that's really cool. It's just a very different deck, and that's one of the things I like in DBS. Like, there's a lot of variety, and a lot of this variety comes from very niche interactions of evolve into that guy to evolve into that guy, or servant into this overlord, or bond into that guy. And yeah, that's another aspect of it. There's another brick to that wall. It's very fun. I know it's not powerful, but that's fine. It doesn't need to be powerful all around for me to be for it to be fun and bring to the game overall.
Nice. All right. I mean, well, that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah.
Now,
listeners might not realize it, but it's nearly 4 hours of recording now.
Not enough. Well, actually, Vince, I mean, not to pop your bubble, but I hope you've got another couple hours left in you, because there is one other keyword that we've not mentioned.
Oh.
Anybody know what it is?
Oh, let me have a look now. Another keyword. Keyword that we haven't. Oh, super combo.
Super combos.
Of course.
Right, here we go. 2 hours on super combos. Starting now.
Talking about super combos whole episode in itself.
I was kind of hoping neither of you would get it, and
then that'd be the end. But we did. Too smart for you, Barry.
No. It's just the super combos don't know about super combos.
No, of course. But do we want to talk about Super Combo quickly?
No. It's definitely a whole nother discussion on super combos, right? Particularly now.
Fair play. Like there's a lot to say about it. It's true.
Yeah, I think before set 9, there probably wasn't loads to say apart from Power Crest is obviously just better than all the rest of them. But now we've had a good variety of extra ones they put into the game, which I do like. There's probably quite a lot to talk about them, and I think just as like my brief one-liner on this, Bandai have done a good job recently of making super combos interesting, pushing the power level a little bit, which is fine because the rest of the game is getting more powerful. But then looking at Unison Warrior 2, all the super combos seem to do the same thing. They put a card on the bottom of the deck and you draw 2. That's just the pushed version of the full lesser life and draw one. I guess they need to balance the draw ones versus these fancy ones that have come out in set 10. But
but,
I mean,
are we talking about it? Why are we talking about it?
Not now. We can have a.
We can do an in-depth one about super combos, when to use them, how to use them.
Let's right. So midnight now. Shall we say 6 o'clock? Reconvene.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll think about that.
Super.
Cool.
ComBros. Right, done. I mean, that's it for keywords. I mean, if you've got any hot takes on what are good cards and what were good keywords, or outstanding examples, we didn't really get into like other abilities on cards, right? It's just things that are keyworded. So autos that do the same thing didn't necessarily come up, or even activate main, activate battles that do some things that are keyworded didn't come up. But I'm sure there will be some interesting discussions to be had in the comments. We'll keep an eye on that if anybody wants to shout out to us on the YouTubes. And yeah, I mean that was it. Anybody got any parting thoughts on how Bandai are doing or how the game's operating with keywords?
I think keyword bloat is an issue, but we'll see how it goes in the future.
Magic's managed it for 30 years.
It's one of those things. Like, it seems weird to keyword some stuff and not others, but
I mean, there's a lot that can be said, I guess, about templating, and as much as we like the mechanics and the design of the game overall, and we really enjoy it, there definitely are things to say about how they think about templating and how it's presented on the card for the user, for the player. But hey, as for parting words, when there's no better bro than a super combro.
Jino sama mo tamage.